Well, it rained and it poured. It got very muddy to the point where we couldn't really tell who was playing for who. And unfortunately, the Bears just missed out against Newcastle Thunder. But we've got all the reaction and the analysis to come. This is the world's greatest podcast about the Coventry Bears. This is Bare Necessities. Yes, welcome to Bare Necessities. I'm one of your hosts, Dave Musson, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Craig Cathcart, former Bears player, of course. We're sat here in the stands just after the Newcastle game, looking over at a very, very muddy Butts Park Arena pitch. And that pitch has just played host to the Bears, unfortunately losing 18-32 to Newcastle Thunder. Craig, what are you feeling right now? Because that was a real game of two halves for the Bears.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
I'm sorry not to be able to talk about a Bears win, but I'm very proud of the players, particularly in the second half. It was one of those days where the conditions were awful, but the Bears really can hold their heads up high. It was a great second half performance.
We'll get into that in more detail in a moment. Should probably remind you all, of course, that we live at covbearspodcast.com. We're at covbearspodcast on Twitter. You can get in touch with us on there whenever you like. Of course, you can send us an AskMrC question, which we'll have a couple of later in this show, some Easter-themed ones, which you did us proud with. And, of course, we'll also, at the end of the show, we'll look ahead to next week's game against Whitehaven, the last of a trio of home matches before the Bears have a couple of tough away trips as well. And also, we will hear the post-match thoughts from Bears head coach Tom Tsang. But let's just quickly recap on the game. So Bears started pretty well. They had a very good kickoff and got a couple of repeat sets, but unfortunately weren't able to capitalise it and turn it into points. And Newcastle ended up opening the scoring in the 7th minute. They finished off from close range with a converted try. And then Newcastle scored twice more before the break. A couple of fortunate tries, really. The second try on 14 minutes sort of made it. The fullback made a quick break in his own 30, found a gap, and just went for it, and the Bears were just caught flat-footed. And the third Newcastle try was quite a controversial one. There was a series of knock-ons. There was a high tackle in there. There was a lot going on, and it definitely should have been brought back for something, but play was allowed to go on. And Newcastle scored. They converted all of their tries in the first half to go in 18-0 up at half-time. Should also mention as well, this was the first game of the season for Jamal Hunt back in the starting lineup. He put in a really good shift in the first half, but unfortunately went off with an injury just after half an hour. And we can hear a little update on that in Tom's interview a bit later on. Second half, though, don't know whether the Bears were it was just an opportunity to reset and get out the rain, or whether they were inspired by the local primary school kids doing a really good demo of some touch rugby at half time. But second half was much better for the Bears, despite the fact that Newcastle actually opened the scoring in the second half as well. Took it to 24-0, and a couple of us were thinking it might have been a big score, but the Bears really reacted well. James Mason scored his third try in a week, and it was pretty much identical to his other two tries this week. And of course, Benstead converted. That was on 48 minutes, and then in the 55th minute, Errol Carter scored. Brilliant kick from Benstead, a grubber kick through into the corner, which Errol got on the end of. Great vision from Ben and great finish from Errol. Of course, Ben converted. Newcastle then edged ahead again with a penalty on the hour mark. And then the last 5 minutes or so, it was all a little bit mad. It got a bit silly on the pitch. There was a double sin binning. Chris Vitellini going in the bin for the Bears, seemingly for the crime of being punched in the face 3 times, which was a bit odd. Didn't realise that was a sin binable offence, particularly when the person who did the punching also only got a sin bin. And then shortly after that, Newcastle scored another try. Their fullback, completing his hat-trick, just spotted a gap, showed his class and went through it, and they converted that try to take it 32-12. But again, the Bears didn't lie down, and they finished the game scoring again. Benstead reacting quickest to a loose ball on the Newcastle try line to score, and of course he converted because he never misses, which meant the Bears won the second half. Final score of 18 to the Bears, 32 to Newcastle Thunder. 353 people saw it. We'll go through the analysis very shortly, but first, here's the post-match reactions from Bears head coach Tom Tsang. So, Tom, bit of a difficult one to summarise that, really, because the first half, obviously, Bears went in scoreless, but arguably 2 of the 3 tries Newcastle scored were quite fortunate. Second half was definitely a lot better, and Bears won the second half. I know that's kind of thing, it's kind of small consolation, really, but what did you make of that game? Because it felt like, in terms of shape, the team looked good, defence looked good, perhaps just a case of Newcastle being more clinical?
Well, I think so. First thing to say is we've watched a lot of video on Newcastle, me and the coaches, and what we saw was what they gave us today. So what they do is they go one out off the ruck, just one pass off the ruck, but they hit the ball real flat, and their runners are close to full speed when they're hitting the ruck, and all they're trying to do is generate ruck speed to either find a quick play the ball or a penalty in the ruck, and so we knew what we were looking for. And we managed to, I think defensively we handled that fairly well in the first half and in the second half as well. But on the flip side of that, what they do defensively is they get real good line speed in the middle channel of the field, but they don't really get much line speed on the edges defensively. So what our game plan was just to get to a tram line, sort of 20 metres in from touch, and then go back down a short side and keep working over the short side of the field where the line speed isn't so great. That was the game plan. In the first half, we just didn't do it, and I don't know why. We were really dumb. We got sucked into just going one outs ourselves through the middle area of the field, where their line speed and their defence was really aggressive and getting off the line, and it just limited us to sort of 20 metres, 30 metres every exit set, and that meant then there was pressure on our kickers, and we weren't getting much distance on our kicks. They were getting the ball over the halfway line, and it was just putting pressure on us. And I honestly don't know why. And I asked the question at half time: why we're not doing what we've worked for all week, what the game plan was, and then the question was, can we actually change that and start doing what we asked? Second half, we did that, and the results were clear. We worked down those tram lines, we worked down the short sides, we got a load of joy, we got some quick play the balls ourselves, and we actually started then to threaten. So I think if we'd have played the first half how we wanted to, like we did in the second half, it would have been a much closer game, and you never know what the result could have been. Very different. But yeah, it was just frustrating because what we'd asked the lads to do, they didn't. But when they did start doing it, we started to get results, and like I say, you don't know what could have been if we'd have done that from the start. So promising signs. Defensively, we were better than we were last week, and we're starting to we're definitely improving. The problem with improvement is it's not a linear process. You don't sort of go from one step to the next step. You might go forward on a few things and backwards on a couple of others, but you just need to keep making sure that overall that you're improving. But it was encouraging, and it was an improvement. And I think, like I said, in different circumstances we might have got a result there, but we do need to be smarter in what we do and make sure that we're working to game plans.
And it feels like certainly a lot of the things I've been hearing since full-time whistle, people saying, Bears of last season go 24-0 down, it probably would have been a much bigger score against. You must take heart, and it feels like it's further proof of what we talk about every week about the fact that this team's more together this year. Feels like the rewards are coming from the players being more locally based. Would you agree with that? It's a reflection that progress has really been made this year.
Yeah, I think on that side of it, I think the last 2 or 3 games, they've all been tough games, and we've been up against it in big patches. And like you say, I think last year, in those patches where we were on the back foot, we might have conceded 2 or 3 tries. Whereas this year, we're able to just, if we concede one, then we're able to steady ourselves, not panic or not lose the process that we're trying to achieve, and get back into it. So that grit and that determination, that I guess character was shown last week. It was shown against Dissington, and I think winning those games as well has given the guys a bit of confidence that they can stick in games and stick to process. So, and again, coming back into this game today, that'll give them confidence again. We're just all a bit frustrated that we didn't manage to do it right from the first whistle, and that's something that we need to do. and be aware of his starting stronger than we have been doing. And that's something that we'll look at and something we'll work on.
Now, I don't want to get you into trouble, so if you don't want to answer, that's fine. But there was quite a lot of negative noises, shall we say, around the refereeing performance today. Do you feel like you've got any gripes with the way the game was officiated today, or is that just typical rugby league fans never being happy?
I don't want to. Well, actually, I'm not sure whether he listened to this podcast or not, but I thought he was terrible. In all honesty, I thought he missed a lot. I thought their third try wasn't a try. It was off the back of a high tackle which he just let go, and a knock on from them as they kicked through. And I thought it was kind of irrelevant in terms of the result, but the sin bin for Chris at the end, when he just stood there and took three punches on the chin and didn't retaliate and didn't do anything but to get yellow carded at the same time as their player, and then the penalty go against us, was just laughable. But let's hope he doesn't listen to this podcast.
Yes, yeah, good point. One thing that I think a lot of people were probably excited to see today was Jamal Hunt back in the starting lineup. Obviously didn't go so well for him. He went off with an injury after about half an hour. How is he? How bad is the injury? Is he likely to be out for a while, or do you hoping that he can be back in contention soon?
Not too sure yet. He just, as he was taking the ball in, he got his foot caught underneath him and bent backwards over it. It's just his left ankle. Physio says it's a grade 1 sprain, which I don't know what that means particularly, but it's probably about 2 to 3 weeks at worst, if we're being positive. So hopefully he can get some good work done on the rehab side of things over the next week or two, and he'll be back before we know it. So.
How do you think he did, considering his first game of the season? I know he had a run out for the Dragons last weekend, didn't he? But first game of this level this season, from the stands, he looked like he put in a good shift. Yeah,
he was working hard. It wasn't really the conditions for a player of Jammer's skill and his attributes that he has and what he brings to a team. It was very heavy underfoot. We're sat here now in the stands and you can see big puddles all over the field, standing water. So it wasn't really one for the outside backs, but I think his work rate was there, and I think that actually for the whole team, our work rate and our attitude was much higher for the full 80 minutes this week than it was last week. So that's one thing that I'm really pleased about, and that's one of those things that's promising.
So we're back at home next Sunday. You've got a bit of the longer break after a short turnaround this week. Back at home for visit to Whitehaven next week. So what's the plan going into that game? I guess no different to any usual game. But what sort of challenge do Whitehaven pose?
I think it's just the experience that they have in the team. The real seasoned professionals, and tough with it. So we know that we're going to be in for a real game. We have. I already know that we've got some selection problems this week coming up because there's Ben Stead, Errol Carter, and Malachi, who made his debut today, are all away next week on a trip that was already planned before they signed. So we're going to have to again sort of dig into the depth of the squad and ask some guys to step up if need be. But everyone in the group is really close knit and really bonded. So anyone that does come into the sides because of that, I know that they'll put their all into it.
Well, thanks as always for your time, Tom. Hope you get dry, and see you next week.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, mate.
Okay, post-match thoughts of Bears head coach Tom Tsang there. As always, we appreciate Tom talking to us on this podcast. So, Craig, we mentioned at the start of the show, really, really good second half and lots of positives to take from this game. I mean, it's a difficult one to analyse, really, because there are a couple of fortunate tries for Newcastle.
Yeah.
But overall, Bears defended well. They kept their shape pretty well, particularly in the second half. And as we've said a lot, that second 40 minutes was a massive improvement. And if they can play like that against other teams in this division, we're going to get a lot of wins this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I said on the last show that this is a measure of how good this squad are. I'm of the opinion that this is a better Bears squad than last year. I'm of the opinion that, the guys are working so much harder this year. They really want to get results, and going in 18-0 at half time, and actually they were unfortunate to do so. I'm not going to say Newcastle weren't the better team. They were the better team in the first half. They were more clinical and they were better around the play of the ball, and certainly in the tackle they were much stronger than the Bears. But second half, the Bears' aggression in the tackle improved. They were much smarter around the play of the ball. They used possession well, and they can be so proud about that second half performance. Last year, I'm pretty certain that that the Bears wouldn't have had this performance in the second half. They give an 80-minute performance today and really competed for large parts of the game with Newcastle. And let's not forget, Newcastle are going to be one of the teams up near the top of the league this year. I've no doubt that they'll be probably in the top 3 this year. They've already gone to London and put 60 points past them. They've gone to Hemel and put 74 points past them. So, this is a fantastic team. The main difference was Newcastle were just more clinical. Their fullback is an exceptional player. I think he was League One Player of the Year last year. His pace and everything else is just unbelievable. I mean, he'll be playing at a higher level pretty soon, I'm pretty sure. First half Newcastle were probably more aggressive in the tackle, but second half Bears more than matched them. They really did do well, and the Bears pack deserves so much credit. You could really see it in the second half. Every tackle, there was pats on the back, and the guys were really working hard for each other, and they didn't give an inch in the second half. And as a Bears fan, I couldn't be more proud, really. I'd like to be talking about a win, but there have been people around the country would have been expecting probably quite a heavy defeat for the Bears today, and to more than match Newcastle for large parts of the game is exceptional, really. The Bears players deserve a lot of congratulations today.
I mean, let's be fair, when it went to 24-0, we were probably fearing the worst, but the Bears really did step up in that second half. I think it was interesting to hear Tom say that he felt the players played dumb in the first half, and clearly frustrated that they didn't stick to the game plan, because they showed in the second half that when they do stick to the game plan, the Bears coaches actually know what they're doing, actually know what they're talking about. That preparation is not without reason, and they really can put a challenge up for teams. How gutting was it for you to see Jamal go off injured after just half an hour on his first game?
It was brilliant to see him back. He was playing really, really well. Hopefully it's nothing serious and he'll be back playing again. He's a fantastic player for the Bears, and a really dangerous player and a really hard-working one. So he'll be back. I think in terms of Tom's comments, I think one thing that was noticeable in difference between the first half and the second half was that Newcastle played the referee quite well. They did a lot of creeping 1 or 2 yards offside and didn't give the Bears much room, particularly around the play of the ball. The Newcastle players are advancing quite quickly. In the second half, the Bears cottoned onto that, and they were also doing the same. So, I don't want to criticise the ref, but it was a difficult day to referee, is all I will say, because the conditions were pretty horrific. So, I don't necessarily blame him, but the Bears in the second half certainly played much smarter and, utilised the conditions and the referee to try and even things up. And they certainly did even things up, and as I said before, they won the second half, so there's not much more you can ask than that. I think there was times last year where in the last 20 minutes in games the Bears were losing, the other team really just stretched away in the last 20 minutes and put some points on the board. Today the Bears actually scored more points than their opponents, so there's a lot to be positive about. I think the Bears can look at games ahead in the season and think, actually, we can win quite a few of these games, and hopefully they'll do that.
And very diplomatically put on the refereeing there. I know we don't really want to go into that debate too much, and we've already heard what Tom thought of the refereeing today as well. And for anyone who was in the crowd, you probably agree with him. Was there anyone else who particularly caught your eye? Just to wrap up on our analysis of this game, I know Malachy had his debut today, and I think he looked
played
good.
Really well. Joel Thomas was really, really good. I really like him as a player. He's really aggressive when he's going forward. He's aggressive in defence. That's probably something, if I'm honest, something the Bears have missed a little bit in the last couple of years, is aggressive defence. When opponents have been aggressive with them, they've not been able to match them. And, he's one of those players that really puts in the big hits and carries the hard yards going forward. Ben Gover was phenomenal today. I thought he again was aggressive in defence and aggressive going forward. Can't not mention Ben Stead again. Just phenomenal performance. James Mason, I really liked him again. Such a great find for the Bears to get him in the side.
Do you think the James Mason twist and turn is going to be a thing that we see a lot of?
He
this
seems
season?
to just make space where there's no space available and gets over the line. Cam Pierce-Paul again. Again, Dante Morley-Samuels. I mean, defensively he was fantastic. And I think a special mention as well. Although Jamal was having a really good game. Errol Carter came in for Jamal and actually had a really good game, I thought.
He was really switched on to score that try.
Really switched on and really put himself about. Jason Bass again had a really good game at fullback in really difficult conditions. It's possibly the worst conditions you can have as a fullback, and he did really well. He was really solid. I have to say, probably all of the pack played really, really well. They can all pat themselves on the back because they put in a solid 80-minute performance. I mean, I think last year we were talking about the fact that there was issues with rotation of forwards. This year, certainly, when we rotate, we bring on fresh legs, and we really bring on people who are going to push things forward and really drive the ball on and drive forward and compete. Last year, I'm not sure that was always the case. So I think there's so much to be positive about. And as I say, the Bears really need to be looking to some games this year thinking we can really win this.
Yeah, definitely lots to be positive about. And I think another thing we should mention as well, following on from his excellent forward roll on Sunday, I don't know if you saw Kieran Sherratt with his slip and full dive in the first half. Excellent stuff. I'm enjoying his auditions for the gymnastic team in the Commonwealth Games. Possibly a little late for him to get
again.
On there
He
now.
put in another great performance today.
He did.
He looks so strong this year. I mean, he doesn't give an inch in attack, and really clever player as well. He's really coming on as a player for the Bears.
Good stuff. Well, still to come. We'll look ahead to next weekend's game against Whitehaven, but first it's time to ask Mr. C. Okay, so Ask Mr. C, for those who don't know or don't remember, is the point of the show where I put your questions to my co-host. If you've got a question you want to ask, then use the contact form at covbearspodcast.com or tweet it to @covbearspodcast. Use the hashtag AskMrC and I'll put it to Craig for you. Now, we put a call out for Easter-themed questions this week and you didn't let us down. So we got a couple for you, Craig. And I don't know, we'll decide at the end whether they're cracking or excellent or any of those things. Yes, let's see what we came up with. So, Tim Gradio says, as per the cream egg slogan, how do you eat yours?
I have to say, I bite the top off and suck the middle out. That's the only way to eat a cream egg, surely, isn't it?
Yeah. Wouldn't go
I
down the route of dipping anything in it.
No, I've
odd.
always dreamed about a proper a full-sized Easter egg with Cadbury's cream egg filling in the middle. But that might be sugar overload. That
would be quite a weighty thing. Perhaps we should try and get Cadbury as sponsors for the show for next season and see if we can make that happen.
Yeah. If you're listening, Cadbury, give us a shout.
Okay, and our second Easter themed question is from York's Tim, who I've completely forgotten to say very kindly sponsors this section of the show, so thank you, York's Tim. He says, we all love a good yolk. Boom, boom. Can you give us a funny tale from your time playing with the Bears?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and they're related to the same player, really. We had a player a few years back called Adam Lindsay, an Aussie guy, who was an absolute giant of a man. And to this day, he holds a record for the fastest sending off for the Bears. He once came on. I actually can't remember which game it is. It was my memory from that day is a bit hazy, but he came on as an interchange. Came on the field. First hit up, I think the team we were playing had a few Aussies playing for them, so I think he thought, I'm going to have to prove a point here.
Mm-hmm.
First hit up, he decided to absolutely smash someone, but as they ran in, his elbow crept up and contacted with their head, and he was straight off the field. So he lasted probably no more than 10 seconds, and
That's
the crowd were kind of half laughing, half crying, half not knowing what to do at the time he was sent off. But relating to that, he was also a guy that knew a lot of quite famous rugby league players, actually. At that time, he said that he told everyone he was very good friends with a guy called Adam McDougall, who was an Aussie international at the time and was over in the UK touring with the Kangaroos. He played State of Origin for New South Wales. I think he made a number of appearances for Newcastle Knights, and at that time he was one of the best Australian players going, and none of us believed him that he even knew him. But
well, you wouldn't, would you?
No, and at the time, myself and Alan Robinson, CEO of the Bears, and Matt Salty Wright, who was a player at the Bears, all shared a house, and one day there was a knock at the door, and Alan answered it, and stood there was Adam McDougall in an Aussie Kangaroos tracksuit saying, is Adam here? And we were all just absolutely gobsmacked, because this superstar who we were all watching on the TV was suddenly just outside our front door.
And you weren't able to convince him to play for the Bears that weekend?
Well, there's another story there, not involving Adam, but maybe one of his family, but I won't go into detail on that right now.
Oh, okay. Oh, I like the sound of that. I have to try and tease that out of you at some point, or maybe just when I press stop on the recording. Well, some excellent Easter-themed questions there. Thank you, as always, for sending them in. Don't forget, if you've got some questions you want to ask Craig, hashtag AskMrC to @CovBearsPodcast, or use the contact form at covbearspodcast.com. And of course, we are very grateful to York's Tim for sponsoring this section. Okay, so we're almost done for another episode, our second episode of this week. That's all very exciting, isn't it? But we're not going to leave you before we preview next weekend's game at home to Whitehaven on Sunday at the Butts Park Arena, 3:00 kickoff. Craig, we've already played a difficult team from Cumbria this year in the shape of Dissington. Whitehaven's going to be that plus about 400 levels on top, isn't it? It's not going to be an easy match next week.
No, and I think they only just missed out last year, didn't they, on promotion? I think they lost by 2 points in the playoff final. So they're going to be a good team. I mean, I have so much respect for Cumbrian Rugby League. They are going to be a real test for the Bears. But looking at today's performance, the Bears have got to hold their... think that they have a potential chance to win that game. Whitehaven have a long journey down to the Butts Park Arena, so they got every chance. I think they won today. They beat Workington, which Workington have had a really good start to the season and have brought in quite a lot of big players this year. So they're certainly going to be strong. But again, Bears, based on today's performance, the Bears really have a good chance of getting a result.
Now, Tom mentioned in his post-match interview that he is already aware of a couple of potential selection issues next week. He mentioned Ben, Errol and Malachy not being available next week, and obviously Jamal's unlikely to feature as well. But we've already seen this season that the squad members are stepping in and stepping up. Yeah. And there's no reason I don't think there's any reason to panic next week that even with those players who've made a real impact this season, I don't think there's any reason to panic that they won't be available next week, because we know that there's a squad of players here who are, to coin the club's own phrase, they're in this together and they're willing to step up for that jersey. So it's a good opportunity for them in many ways.
We've got the strongest squad I think we've had since going into League One. So, anyone that has to come into the squad and into the first team will make a difference. So, I'm not particularly worried about that. The squad are really well coached this year. They're really, so far there's been so many positives, and they really have to believe in themselves and think that they might be able to get a result against Whitehaven. as I said, it's not going to be easy. We know it's not going to be easy, but they've got a real chance of getting a result if they can perform at the potential we know they can.
And it's, this month, it's a big month for the Bears. Whitehaven at home, Bradford away, Widnes away, London at home. All tough sounding matches, but, there's no point in being in this league if you don't want to challenge yourself and get excited about playing the big teams and really pitting yourself against the best, is there?
Yeah, and the players that are available for next week have got to think of the Bradford away game, Widnes away. They've got to think, I want to be in those. I want to be playing against both of those teams. Those are both massive games. So, and there's real competition in the squad, as you say. And I'm convinced we're going to have a good performance next week.
Yeah, me too. We should also say, just before we go, we are almost done for this week's episode. We should say there are plans to put on a supporters coach up to Widnes for the Challenge Cup game. Details, I think it was leaving Butts Park Arena at about 9 in the morning on the Saturday the 21st, and leaving Widnes at about 5. But if you want more details of that and you didn't sign up to the supporters group mailing list at the last home game, then if you email supporters@coventrybears.co.uk, they'll get all the details to you. And I think the details of it were going in the club newsletter as well. But if you fancy a trip up to Widnes and you don't fancy the drive, I think coach travel was £16 return.
Yeah, well worth it. I'll definitely be going.
Yeah, it's that £16 doesn't include your match ticket, but hey, it's the Bears in the cup further than they've ever been before, playing a Super League team. It's worth chucking in a few extra quid to get your match ticket for that. But yeah, that's all to come. A couple of games to negotiate first, and we'll of course be back next week to bring you all the reaction from the Whitehaven match. Craig, I guess we'll go and try and get warm and dry now.
Yeah, I need to get warm. I need to get a beer, and I would have liked to have seen the Bears win today, but as I said right at the start of the show, I'm really proud of the performance today.
Same here. Well, thanks as always for listening. Thank you to the Bears Vice Presidents for also being one of our sponsors, and to York's Tim for sponsoring AskMrC. And we'll see you next time. Ta-ta.
Thanks, Dave.